Hey everybody, I'm Sam Gross with electricbikereport.com, and today we're looking at Ride1UP's 500 series e-bike. This is a category of e-bike we call a comfort commuter bike. It's a little bit more upright, but it's still got that nice, efficient, kind of sporty riding position that's going to get you from point A to point B. It's got a 500 watt rear hub motor that's powered by a 48 volt, 13 amp hour, 642 watt hour battery that's semi-integrated into the frame. It has mechanical disc brakes and a 8-speed Acera Shimano drivetrain. After about 100 miles and some change spent on this bike, we've been really impressed with it. We're gonna take you through some detailed specs of it and then a handful of tests, and we're gonna see how it goes. We'll see you out there. So taking a look at how Ride1UP spec'd the 500 series, we're gonna start at the top of the bike and work our way down to the bottom. All right, so taking a look at the seat, it's from Selle Royale. It's the Freeway Edition, and this thing is fairly wide, very, very cushy. It's gonna give you some nice support, especially since this is a very upright bike. You want a seat that's got a big flat surface that's gonna support your spine and your sit bones. In addition, we've got these faux leather grips. They're stitched on the edge. These are grips that we see quite often on especially value price bikes. They look really nice, but one downside is they can be a little bit slippery, especially if you get sweaty palms like me. So something to consider might be replacing them with some rubber grips, maybe just standard bicycle grips. But again, they look nice, just something to consider. The brakes are Tektro Aries, they're mechanical. They do a really nice job of slowing the bike down. We'll get a little more in detail on that later on during our brake test, but we've put about 100 miles on this bike and all of our testers have agreed the thing does a good job of slowing down. The frame is 6061 alloy aluminum. The battery is a 48 volt, 13 amp hour with about 624 watt hours of energy. That battery powers a 500 watt rear hub motor in the rear. Ride1UP says this thing can peak at 750 watts, but don't expect that to happen very often or for very long. That's a pretty rare thing under extreme load for the motor to peak that high. It's got a Suntour XCT coil spring fork to ease the edge of the bumps and some Kenda Quick 7 tires mounted on 650B wheels. 650B is a really common size we see on a lot of e-bikes. It allows them to fit a slightly bigger tire for a little bit more grip, a little bit more added comfort. The handlebars are mountain bike style. They're low rise. They don't really have much of a sweep back. Again, this is kind of a sportier style comfort commuter that's designed to be efficient and put you in a little bit more of a efficient body position. This bike does also come in a step-through variation though. We haven't tested that bike, but it actually has slightly different geometry. It's gonna have a little bit of a shorter reach, so your body will be more upright, and then the handlebars actually are swept back a little bit more. Again, gonna give you a little bit more of an upright position, a little more of a comfort-oriented bike for people who might have some mobility issues, or you just want an easier bike to get it on and off of. And then to round it all off, Shimano's 8-speed Acera drivetrain. Now this is something that might seem a little bit odd for us to rant and rave about. Acera is something that we see quite often on bikes, but in particular, we love shifters that go underneath the handlebars. If you look closely, this shifter is mounted underneath. A lot of value price e-bikes, we see kind of a shifter pod mounted on top. Why this is so important is because it's actually a safety feature. The only thing keeping your hand on the bars if you hit a big bump or under extreme braking is actually your thumb wrapped around the handlebars. And if you move that thumb up to shift, you could slip off. Believe me, it's happened to me before. It's super uncomfortable, really unpleasant, and can very much make you fall. Shifter pods like this, we really like, so bonus points to Ride1UP for putting underbar shifters. Let's see how the bike performs in some of the tests. So the 500 series is what we call a comfort commuter bike, and it kind of lives up to that name. It's comfortable enough to ride all day without things like back pain and butt pain, but it's quick enough and sporty enough that it's going to get you from point A to point B relatively quickly and without breaking much of a sweat. But overall, this bike handles impressively well. Even though it's kind of on the comfort end of the spectrum, it goes around corners really, really quickly. In our circuit test, which we'll talk about here in a minute, there's one corner in particular where you can go 30 miles or more, and this bike, I personally took it around that fast, and it did just fine. The Kenda tires do a great job of hooking up. So far, over 100 miles of testing, we haven't had any flats, we haven't had any problems with losing traction or grip. It's important to note though that this bike is really meant for paved surfaces. You can do some light duty path riding, maybe some gravel riding, but you're really not going to want to take it off-road very much. But as long as you keep it on pavement, this thing does a really great job. The Ride1UP 500 series did spectacularly well for the range test. On the max assist setting, which is PAS 5, it went 27.17 miles, which is just a little bit over Ride1UP's claimed range of 25 miles. Did this in 1 hour, 25 minutes, and about 19 miles an hour. That's a pretty good result. But where it really impressed us was in the PAS 1 settings. It went for 67.36 miles, which is way further than what Ride1UP claims it can do. That is an incredibly impressive battery range. Granted, it did 13-mile-an-hour average, and it took us 5 hours and 8 minutes to do that distance, but 67 miles is really impressive on a single charge. So in order to get an idea of how the 500 series climbs, we brought it out to a local steep part of our bike path that we lovingly call Hellhole. It's about 12% on average, of a third of a mile long. It's pretty steep. This is where we test all of the e-bikes that we review here at EBR. And we're gonna put this thing through 2 laps on it, 1 on throttle only and 1 on max pedal assist. We're not totally sure how it's gonna do. It's a comfort commuter bike with a 500-watt motor. So we already know from doing our range tests and from other rides we've done on the bike, it's not the torquiest motor, but we still expect it to do just fine. Let's see how it climbs. So the first of the 2 tests we did with the 500 series up this very remarkably steep hill, especially considering that this is a commuter bike that is not really designed to go up a hill this steep. But the first of the 2 we did was throttle only, and it was a bit of a doozy. The bike probably wouldn't have quite made it up the hill had I not done a little bit of switchbacks, actually right here in the steep section. But it took 2 minutes and 43 seconds to make it up this hill, which is about a third of a mile long. My low speed recorded according to Strava was 1.2 miles an hour. It's probably a little bit slower than most people are comfortable keeping their feet up on a bike. But in the second test, which was the max assist level, the bike performed really well. Made it up the hill in 1 minute and 13 seconds with a low speed of 11.8 miles an hour. That ranks pretty well among other bikes that we've tested on this hill. Let's see how it performs in other tests. So for the EBR circuit test, which is about a 1-mile loop on a course that has a small, about 35-foot high hill and no stop signs or any impediments that would slow our riders down, we are putting these bikes to the test to see what the difference is between each of the motor's assistance levels. So we start with a lap with no assistance at all, just us pedaling, and then we go all the way up to the highest assistance level, or in the case of the 500 series, PAS 5. This bike did really well. We like to see e-bikes that have really nice noticeable differences between each of the PAS levels. On no pedal assistance, it went around the track at about 12 miles an hour, which is pretty respectable. I did the test. I think this thing pedals pretty nicely even without motor assistance on it. At max assist, it went at over 24 miles an hour, which is a really good result. This is a class 3 e-bike, meaning its max speed, or at least the max speed the motor will push you to, is 28 miles an hour while you're pedaling. The throttle cuts out at 20 miles an hour, but if you pedal, you can go up to 28. So a 24 mile an hour average lap around our 1-mile circuit is a really fast result. That puts it up there with some of the quicker e-bikes we've tested. Overall, we've been really happy with the performance and the power of the 500-watt motor. It's turning out to be a solid bike. So in order to get an idea of how the 500 series comes to a stop, we're going to put it through a braking test. We've come out to our local park. We've got a series of cones set up. They're 5 feet apart each. And I'm gonna take 5 runs at the full throttle assisted speed at this, which is 20 miles an hour. I'm gonna jam on the brakes, throw my weight back, and see how quickly this bike comes to a stop. And we're gonna take the average of 5 times. Let's see how it does. The 500 series performed pretty well on our brake test. On an average of 5 times of coming in here at 20 miles an hour and jamming on the brakes, it came to a stop in 16 feet and 2 inches. It's a pretty good result. This bike comes stock with a pair of Tektro Aries disc brakes. Those are mechanical brakes, a little bit less powerful than the hydraulics, but they do just a fine job of bringing the bike to a stop. Overall, the 500 series has been a really great bike to test. This is the second bike from Ride1UP that I've personally done the test on, and they've been a really great company to work with. Just like any bike that we review, sometimes we have questions, sometimes we have comments, and they've been really responsive, so you should be very confident in buying a bike from this company. They're gonna get back to you and they're gonna help you. This bike has a 500 watt motor with a 13 amp, 48 volt, 642 watt hour battery. That's given it a pretty good range, and that's one thing I'd like you to take away from this review is that for around 1,300 bucks, you're gonna get a bike that'll go the distance. I did the max assist range test on this bike, and it got over 27 miles. That was an unexpected result. We were pretty surprised, and pleasantly so at that, Matt. So on our hill test, the 500 series kind of performed how we expected. Under just throttle assistance, without my pedaling to help it, it kind of struggled up the hill, but keep in mind that that hill that we test on, Hellhole, that is a kind of an extraordinary case for this bike. It's steep, it's long, you're really not going to encounter this thing, or you really shouldn't be taking this bike on the hill like that. Under max assist though, it did great. It was a nice pedaling bike. I was able to sit the whole time. It had some power to it, but just keep in mind that this is a 500 watt motor. It's not gonna be the torquiest, it's not gonna be the fastest, but it has no problem getting up to its max speed of 28 miles an hour, especially if you're in its perfect, happy environment of city streets, bike paths, neighborhoods, things like that. On hills though, you should expect it to slow down just a little bit because, you know, gravity's a thing. In the brake test, the bike performed very, very well. 16 feet and 2 inches on average to stop from full bore at 20 miles an hour on the throttle. That's a good result, that's pretty quick. So you should feel confident this bike is going to slow you down safely and when you need it to do it. If you've liked this review and you want to know more about the 500 series, there's a link to an in-depth review in our bio that I wrote. I would highly suggest reading it. It goes a little more in depth than what we've done in this video. If you want to tell us what you think about the bike, leave us a comment down below. And if you've liked this video, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. For Electric Bike Report, I'm Sam. We'll see you on the next ride.